Hi, welcome to Random Reading Pathways, the name that I've chosen for this new Booktube channel. It seems like there's a lot of people jumping on board and starting up new Booktube channels recently, at least from what I've seen in my recent delve into the Booktube world, which has been really rewarding for me and great. So I figured what's one more added onto the pile. So I have the Booktube Newbie tag attached to this video, and I have the questionnaire for that up next to me. Apologies in advance here for kind of the haphazard format of this video, where I'm just kind of holding my phone and hopefully not giving you a headache looking at this. I do intend on coming up with a better presentation for this channel, but really I've just been excited about reading lately. 2024 has, for some reason or another, just jumped out at me as my reading year after many unfortunate years of non-reading years and just falling off the wagon of being a consistent reader as I was years back. So I'm trying to capitalize on that momentum here. Certainly been, reading more than I have in many years this year, enjoying it much more than I even remember, and kind of coincides with also exploring the Booktube space online and really getting a lot of enjoyment out of that, and wanting to see if I could share my 2 cents into the conversation. So again, I do want to get this looking a little bit better and come up with a little more of a organization and format for this channel. But I figured let me just get started, get myself out there, and continue consuming Booktube as I do, so I can maybe take some pointers and try to get this a little bit more digestible. But for now, I am a Booktube newbie, as I said, so that should be apparent from the format of this video. But anyway, so question 1 on the questionnaire says, why did you start this channel? Well, like I said, I've been reading a pretty good amount this year, certainly not to the level that I think a lot of people do, especially heavy readers in the Booktube space, but it's just been a real banner year for me in terms of finally getting back on the horse in terms of pursuing reading constantly and consistently and accumulating books to that end, which is something I always knew I needed to do and needed to have as my one consistent hobby and pursuit to carry me in my leisure pursuits. And this just happened to be the year that it sort of started coming together. I'm hoping to continue that momentum, like I said. But it just, as I started accumulating some books recently and checking off some books on my to-read list, and consuming some Booktube with that, it just really felt like, the next logical step for me. I think reading is a shared thing. I think that the love of books and digesting books, analyzing them, and discovering them is one of the best things you can do in a shared sense with others, and that's what Booktube brings to the table. So I just really was kind of excited to see if I could jump in feet first and see if I can get into that space myself. So question 2, what are some fun and unique things that you can bring to Booktube? Booktube is very fun and unique in itself, and I don't have a all-encompassing knowledge of it, but I have dabbled quite a bit in recent months and found myself getting lost in cycles of people's videos that I've really enjoyed. So it's such a unique and rewarding space already that it's hard to imagine bringing something unique and different to it. But maybe fun, maybe if I focus on the fun part. So let me at least focus here a little bit on the title I've chosen for the channel, Random Reading Pathways. Hopefully that's something unique and different I can bring to the Booktube space. So in a nutshell, what it means. As I said, I hadn't read consistently for many years at this point. But there was a period earlier in life, in probably middle teenage years into the early mid high school years, and a little bit like into the college years, but kind of in that time frame when I was doing pretty well with reading. Again, not reading hundreds of books a year or anything like that, but at least reading consistently. And what helped me do that back then was something that is sort of captured in the title of this channel, which is random reading. What I mean by that's a couple different things, but it could be defined a few ways. So one is the most literal definition of the word random, which is literal random number generation. I don't know if this is something a lot of people do. I maybe have heard of it before from some people that like tossing a dice, as you can see in the thumbnail I've chosen for this channel, and seeing where it lands and seeing what book that brings into your hand. That is something I started doing in that earlier time period in my life to keep that flame lit and keep the hunger there for reading and reading the next book and seeing what fate would bring me to. That was kind of outside my control. I kind of like the feeling of being turned over to just chance. So I would go to, back then, certainly was reliant on the library more than anything else because the funds were certainly not flowing in any sense where I felt capable or justified in purchasing anything of any value. So back then it was largely doing the random number generator on my phone or whatever device I had back in 2000, whatever year that was, that could lead me to a random book. And my library that I used back at that time had a pretty good solid fiction section. So I would go and I would assign random numbers to the shelves and I would punch in the number generator, and that would eventually lead me to a book. I followed the random number generator almost blindly. I won't say 100% blindly because sometimes it landed on things that I just were a little bit too far away from what I could imagine ever wanting to read. So I would maybe skip those and do another punch of the generator, or I would just maybe accidentally slide my hand over an inch to the next book. But for the most part, if it landed on a fiction book that was not like a romance title or a Nora Roberts, no offense to that author, if everyone likes Nora Roberts, that's fine, but it just was kind of the quintessential example of it kind of had its own dominant little area in the library shelves, and if random number took me there, I reran the system. But other than that or something similar, I enjoyed following the randomness. And just as kind of like a example from what I can remember from years ago, of certain books the random number generator landed me on that I ended up just loving at the time, and interestingly coming to find out years later as I got back into reading and sort of re-educated myself on what books have kind of stood the test of time since the early 2000s and everything. Just as an example of what random reading can do for you and has done for me is, I remember random number generator landing me on Donna Tartt's The Secret History. I remember random number generator landing me on a John Irving book, which was The Water Method Man, which isn't typically seen in the big heavy hitter list of John Irving books, I don't believe. But I was happy to find it through that because I was sort of in a little phase of reading comedic books at that time, largely because of this one over here, Confederacy of Dunces, which wasn't a random number generator read. It was actually an airport bookstore. I was stuck with a delayed flight and I needed a book. And I did have actually enough funding on me on that time to grab something. And I got Confederacy of Dunces. That got me into a comedic book kind of phase. So the random number actually took me to John Irving's The Water Method Man, which I have a little selection of recent book haul here that I figured I would maybe show as part of the intro here. And so I did find this. Apologies for the glare, but this is John Irving's The Water Method Man. It is a comedic kind of rip-roaring sort of crazy book. It's years since I read it, but I did find it just the other day at a used bookstore, so I grabbed it. But again, this is a whole tangent, but what the purpose of this is to just kind of give you a few examples of what random number generator and random reading has led me to in the past, and it's really never let me down. The second way I would define random reading pathways is not the literal definition of random where you're putting a number generator in or throwing a dice, but a little less than that, but still somewhat random in the sense of I just have a feeling right now I'm just going to run out to a used bookstore or I'm going to run out to a thrift store, which is kind of what I've been doing lately to sort of beef up my book haul a little bit in anticipation of trying to get this channel started. But anyway, it's more of that random whim or that random kind of spur of the moment inspiration or feeling, or oh, that book is really like looking good to me for some reason, I'm just going to swipe it off the shelf. It's that kind of random too, which I follow as well. But like I said, the primary engine that drives my reading and keeps me reading continues to be literal random number generation reading, either a library or a very cheap used bookstore, because obviously purchasing books new, we all I think know that that's a pretty penny, and usually I won't do that unless it's a really specific book that I know I want in my collection, or there's some other reason for it. But yeah, and then the third part of random reading and this is all question 2 here, what are some fun, unique things you can bring to Booktube? But what I'm trying to say is, I don't know if I've seen something akin or similar to this random reading idea I have, where you use random number generation and just random whims and spur of the moment purchases. That I see, but when you throw it all together, the way I consume books and the way I have one book lead me to the next book and lead me to the next book seems to be a little bit unique. So hopefully that's something that will be different and maybe enjoyable to people to see, where chance and fate take me on this journey. And the third little last part I want to add to that, which also to me is a part of random reading pathways as I've set out to define it, would be connections between books and connections between stories and characters and things like that. So what I mean in a nutshell there is randomness truly random, or is there some connection? I mean, that's an interesting thing to ponder, right? The idea of fate and whether, free will is a true thing or whether there's some predetermined, predestined thing going on. Not to get too philosophical about it, but the more I've done random reading, and I'm talking more so literal randomness, but the more I've done it, it's one of those things where, not to get cliche or, state any strong-held beliefs about this, but I can't help but find that along this random reading journey, more often than not, I've found, oh, that's interesting. This book connects to another book I read in some unexpected way, or this character, does like the same habit as this character did in this story, which are completely unrelated. Never probably would have read these 2 books if randomness didn't lead me to them. But alas, in the end, there's a pretty strong resemblance or connection between something about them. And I hope to, when I notice those moments, which are actually more often than not, I hope to be able to highlight those here and maybe highlight some interesting, again, random or maybe not so random connections between books that otherwise may have gone unnoticed. Let me keep going through this so I don't get too long. What are you most excited for about this new channel? That would definitely be about hopefully connecting with anyone or someone out there who takes any interest in what I'm saying, and being able to maybe connect with them and read what they have to say, or watch what they have to say on Booktube, just kind of joining the community, making some connections through it, and enriching my own reading journey through that. Why do you love reading? That's a really open-ended, big question. Just to keep it very simple and put a little nice bow tie on it, it's my favorite activity to do aside from just the other responsibilities in life. The escapism of it, I am somebody who likes to be challenged by a book, so I'm definitely not going to shy away from almost anything. I enjoy reading for a challenge, and I do enjoy the sense of accomplishment that comes with completing a challenging or semi-challenging book. I get a strong sense of satisfaction and accomplishment from diving into a book without really any prefacing of it or research, and just figuring out what's going on. I know it sounds simple, like that's what you do when you read a book. You figure out what's going on. But yeah, there's something about that that's just always rewarding every time. Having that aha moment where the book's plot comes together and you realize something about it that was sitting there, unwritten between the lines. It's just endlessly rewarding. So that's sort of what keeps me going with the reading journey. What book or series got you into reading? Well, it depends how young I go, but like I said, I definitely read as a kid. I read kind of the big standard kid series, not all of them, but I was somebody who, when I was a young kid, I did have a bookshelf in my room that had the complete Goosebumps series set out there, as well as right above it, I believe, was the complete Animorph series, or close to that. Those two series stick out in my memory as, I had them on my shelf. I read them from an early age. And then, of course, in the, early preteen years, whatever that was, I'm a person that grew up with Harry Potter like a lot of others. And, certainly am no different from many others who, got obsessed with Harry Potter. And that became kind of my everything book series for quite a long time. I reread it many times. So I think that really hooked me and catapulted me further into reading, and reassured me how much I love it. Again, not different from millions of others, but I would focus on those kind of early series for me. What questions would you ask your favorite booktubers? At this point, I'm still kind of, exploring the space. I'm getting used to what the different formats are and what, insights people have to share. But across the board, what I've liked so far is just this, people just talking about kind of what they read, why they read. I do plan with this channel to do some of the standard booktube videos that I see, book hauls, which I'll just end with a real quick one here. Things like that. I do like ranking books. I don't review books, so I don't plan on reviewing anything because I don't feel like I have any enough authority or literary sense or knowledge to be able to intellectually do that. But as far as ranking favorite books, yeah, that I can do. I would ask booktubers, what keeps you going, what keeps you reading, and what keeps you coming up with fresh things to talk about on your channel, because that would be helpful to me and it would be interesting to learn. And what challenges do you think starting a booktube channel will be the hardest to overcome? Probably part of what I just said. How do I continue to figure out interesting or new things to say? And, how do I distill and organize my thoughts on either a book or a connection between books or something about this random reading journey that is worth sharing or, is worth not sharing? That's kind of the line that I need to, get in my sights. But anyway, I don't want to drag this on much longer. I just wanted this to be kind of an intro video. I'll do a bookshelf show at some point. You probably can see some of those back there. But what I wanted to do just quick was just show a quick recent haul here of a couple other random sort of finds. And I'll tell you what version of random they are. And just to give a little example of like what this journey looks like for me and what this channel could look like if you have any interest in seeing what my random instincts and my random number generation formula here leads me to read. So as I said, I've been doing mostly used bookstores, thrift stores, library book sales, little free libraries, bargain stores, liquidation stores, anywhere where you can go in and there's some books sitting around and you can drop a couple dollars and see what you end up finding. So from a library bookstore, recently my random number generator took me to this book. See if I can get out of the way here. This is Preston Falls by David Gates. I really don't know anything about it. What I did like, and, you know, like I said, if my random number generator takes me to a book that just is completely, you know, not in the realm of anything, again, I don't want to name drop Nora Roberts or anything, but if it's something like that, I'll let it go. So I always do at least look at the book, and I look at the description. This is when Doug Willis has a midlife crisis. He doesn't join a gym or have an affair. Instead, he gets himself arrested while camping with his wife and kids, takes a 2-month leave from his PR job, and retreats to his farmhouse in rural Preston Falls, where he plugs in his guitar and tries to shut out his life in this comic, fiercely compassionate novel. So once I read that much, I kind of was good. As I said, I have had a strong interest in comedic type books over the years, and so anywhere I can get some comedy in my reading, I like to do that. So I'm happy to have found Preston Falls here by David Gates. Some other random things. So as I said, I showed you The Water Method Man by John Irving. This is not a random read newly, but it was years ago a random number generator read that I always wanted to bring into the collection, and I did find a pretty decent used copy of it recently, so I added that one. This is not a random number generator pickup, but this is one of those type 2, I'll call it, randoms, where it's a random whim and something I see and I just pull. This was, I was on vacation visiting family, and there was a clubhouse type thing that had like a little book library in it. I don't know if it was a little free library type thing, but, you know, I will be back there at some point. I can always return it. But for now, this book was there. This is Watership Down by Richard Adams. And interestingly, yeah, so this was a nice copy of this. Again, I'm going to try to improve this channel with the presentation here, but just wanted to show this. I've heard a lot about this, you know, a little bit on reading up on, you know, people's favorite books, and reading Reddit Booktube things, and watching Booktube. So that's when I was interested in when I heard people talk about it, and so wanted to grab it off the shelf. And then very recently at a kind of thrift store, I didn't have any Shakespeare in the collection. This is The Tempest. This is outside of like a signed William Shakespeare in school back in the day. This, The Tempest, is the one that I actually did pick up myself one time and try to get through. I didn't at the time, but I'm thinking, you know, hopefully I'm doing a little bit better right now with reading and challenging things. So hopefully I'll be able to actually get through that one. At the same thrift store was Here, There, Everywhere. This is My Life Recording the Music of the Beatles, Jeff Emmerich and Howard Massey. And I don't do a lot of nonfiction, mostly fiction, but if I do nonfiction, you know, pretty good chance music will find its way into there. That's kind of my other big pursuit and my other big love as far as, you know, leisure things. So that one looked pretty good. That was just kind of a random whim. But see, there was a little more to that one as far as the randomness goes. And going forward with this channel, I want to try to always continue that theme of randomness and how it impacts how I pick a book, and how is it truly random, because there's all these connections I always find and these coincidences. But for that one, very briefly, I'm also just about done with the audiobook, Miracle and Wonder. I think is it Malcolm Gladwell? Yeah, it's an audiobook focusing on Paul Simon's music, his career, and it's interviews with Paul Simon where he just plays a little bit. He talks a little bit about his music, his life. It's just fascinating. A real favorite artist of mine. And just in the car earlier, I was listening to near the end of it, and the Beatles came up, and Paul Simon mentioned specifically Here, There, Everywhere, the song. And so it was in my head from, you know, 10 or 15 minutes before I went to the thrift store. And lo and behold, I see this. So that's the kind of type 2 randomness that I'm kind of talking about, like these weird coincidences. I follow those. If something like that strikes, I jump on it, because I think that's what this random reading pathway is all about. And I think that's really it for the moment. I'll just show you the book I'm reading it right now. This is a random number generator find. So this is complete randomness. Read the back, said, okay, it's not Nora Roberts, so I'll pick it up. This is Pym it is Matt Johnson. I'm a little bit into it so far, not that far, but kind of interesting because it's completely born out of Edgar Allan Poe, which is interesting, the timing right now, because I've seen a lot of things on Booktube lately about Edgar Allan Poe because it's getting into October soon and things like that. But this is recently canned professor of American literature Chris Janes has just made a startling discovery: the manuscript of a crude slave narrative that confirms the reality of Edgar Allan Poe's strange and only novel, The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. So it's about, I believe, him and others come together and they try to find this mythic island, Salal, which is the focus of The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket by Edgar Allan Poe. So that's where the title Pym comes from. This was from a used bookstore, a couple dollars. Apparently, you know, it's pretty well received. I'm enjoying the first chapter or two I've read so far. So again, I have some more books I'll show. I have a lot more plans for video types to do in this channel, but I just wanted to get this recorded and get my Booktube newbie self out there. I really enjoy watching other people's videos, and the goal is just to document my thoughts, document my random reading pathway, and hopefully invite some others along on it. So thank you, anyone that stumbles across this, and hopefully I'll be back with some better quality organization, content, and video quality sometime soon. Thanks a lot.